I've been camping alone in the woods for years, always finding peace in the isolation, the quiet that only deep nature can provide. This time, I'd ventured farther as usual, deep into the Michigan wilderness. It was the kind of place where cell phone reception was non-existent, and the nearest human was probably miles away, just how I liked it. I set up my tent near a small clearing surrounded by tall pines, their branches swaying gently in the evening breeze. As the sun began to sink, the woods transformed. The soft light filtering through the trees grew dim, casting long shadows that stretched across the forest floor. By the time darkness had fully settled in, my campfire was the only source of light for what felt like miles. I sat there by the fire, eating a simple meal and enjoying the sounds of the forest. The chirping of crickets, the occasional hoot of an owl, it was all so familiar. But as the night deepened, those sounds started to fade. It wasn't sudden, but one by one, the noises stopped until there was nothing, just silence. That's when I felt it. The unmistakable sensation of being watched. I looked around, squinting in the darkness, but saw nothing. Just the trees, the shadows, and the faint glow of the dying fire. I tried to shrug it off, but the feeling lingered, gnawing at the back of my mind. Then I heard it. A rustling in the bushes, just beyond the reach of the fire's light. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it toward the noise. The beam cut through the dark, but there was nothing there. I stood up, scanning the area, my heart pounding in my chest. A branch snapped, this time closer. I whipped the flashlight around, and that's when I saw it. Just for a split second, caught in the beam of light. A figure, large and hunched over, standing on two legs but covered in dark, matted fur. Its head, it was a wolf's head, massive and snarling, its yellow eyes reflecting the light. I froze, my mind racing to make sense of what I was seeing. It was impossible. It couldn't be real. But it was. The creature stared at me, sniffing the air, its lips curling back to reveal sharp, gleaming teeth. Instinct kicked in and I took a step back, trying not to make any sudden movements. The creature's ears twitched, its eyes locked on me, and it let out a growl, the sound vibrating through the still night air. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I thought it was going to charge. But it didn't. Instead, it turned and disappeared into the trees, its massive form blending into the shadows, as if it had never been there. I stood there, my heart still racing, the flashlight shaking in my hand. I didn't know what to do, run, hide, or pack up and leave. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't alone out here. The rest of the night passed in a blur of tension and fear. I sat by the fire, knife in hand, listening for any sign of the creature's return. But it never came. By the time the sun rose, I was already packing up, desperate to leave the woods behind. I don't know what I saw that night, but I'll never forget it, and I'll never camp alone again. The plan was simple, a quick weekend camping trip with my buddy Trevor. We'd set up camp, hike during the day, and share a few beers by the fire at night. We'd both grown up hearing the local legends about Dogman, but neither of us had ever put much stock in them. Just stories to scare kids. Or so I thought. It was our second night in the woods, and we were feeling adventurous. Trevor suggested we take a short hike under the full moon. "The trail looks completely different at night," he said, grabbing his flashlight. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We left the campfire smoldering and headed into the woods. At first, everything was fine. The moon was bright, casting a silvery glow over the trees, and the night air was cool and crisp. We walked along the familiar trail, laughing and joking, the sound of our boots crunching against the dirt, the only noise in the stillness. But after a while, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavier, the woods darker, even with the moon overhead. That's when we heard it. Something moving in the trees, following us. We stopped, and so did the sound. Trevor flashed his light into the woods, but we didn't see anything. "Probably just a deer," he muttered. But I could tell he didn't believe it any more than I did. We kept walking, but the sound picked up again. The distinct sound of heavy footsteps trailing us from a distance. My skin prickled, and I glanced at Trevor. His face was pale, his grip on the flashlight tightening. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the darkness, deep and guttural. We froze, our breath hitching. I turned slowly, scanning the trees, and that's when I saw it. A massive shape standing just beyond the edge of the trail. It was on two legs, towering over the underbrush, its silhouette unmistakably canine. My stomach dropped as I realized what we were looking at. The stories were true. The creature stepped forward, its head tilting in our direction. In the moonlight, I saw its face, the face of a wolf. Its eyes glowing unnaturally, its teeth bared in a snarl. It was huge, easily over 7 feet tall, its fur matted and dark. "Run," Trevor whispered, but we didn't move. Neither of us could. The creature let out another growl, louder this time, and took another step toward us. This was all it took. We bolted, sprinting back toward camp as fast as we could. The sound of our feet pounding against the trail was drowned out by the thing crashing through the woods behind us. I didn't dare look back, too afraid of what I might see. We didn't stop running until we reached the safety of the campfire. We collapsed by the fire, gasping for breath, but the creature didn't follow us. It stayed out there, lurking in the darkness. We didn't sleep that night. We packed up and left at first light, not saying a word to each other. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't something either of us wanted to encounter again.